Coming up next on Words and Numbers, Border Patrol,
delayed data,
weeds giving,
and things we're thankful that we don't have.
All this and more coming up on Words and Numbers, a CiVL original production. Check us out at CiVL.com. That's CiVL.com.
Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
Ant, what's new and exciting in your Thanksgiving world? Today is Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, James. Same to you. And having said Happy Thanksgiving, I'm now going to have to be a downer and say what the problem that we're currently facing is residual left over from the shutdown. Of course, we shut down the government and all kinds of things that many of us would think the government shouldn't be doing in the first place get shut down, but then there are other things that the government actually does pretty well that got shut down, in this case, collecting economic data. And what's happened is there are a couple of news releases came out from the Fed recently, or from Bureau of Labor Statistics. One was that the next jobs report they release is going to be for September, which means that it's pretty much useless to us. September is long. I mean, the data is always delayed about a month, but that was going to be so delayed that nobody cares what it says. This other thing is much more concerning, and that is Bureau of Labor Statistics is canceling the October release of the Consumer Price Index. This is the data that the Fed uses in deciding what it's going to do, right? Well, so, I mean, if you imagine... imagine
just lower rates. What the hell? We don't have to care about facts. Just lower the rates.
Yeah, therein lies the problem. You imagine that you're driving a car at night. The Fed is the driver, and all of a sudden the BLS is turned off your headlights, right? And it gets worse because
how could it get
we're in
worse?
A situation right now where the economy is giving signals simultaneously of inflation running a bit hot and unemployment running a bit high. So it becomes very important what the Fed is going to do next. So go back to that image of you're driving and the BLS shuts off the headlights, and combine that with the fact that you just entered a mountain pass where the road is going like this, right? That's the problem the Fed faces over the next couple of months.
Yeah, if only there could have been two guys who predicted that exactly this would happen when the Trump administration took all kinds of issue with the Bureau of Labor Statistics and a jobs report that got revised downward.
Yeah.
Remember when that happened? And they removed the head of BLS and replaced that person with a new, better version who would have better numbers for all of us, which means they're going to cook the books. Turns out they're not going to cook the books. There just won't be any books.
Right. There'll just be no books.
No books.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, look, if they're not reporting the jobs numbers, if they're not reporting the CPI ever or on time or whatever, it's because they know that Donald Trump will react exactly the same way he did last time.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, that might be the case. I don't think that's what's going on. I think it's simply a matter that this stuff requires a tremendous amount of work by analysts on the back end, collecting the data and organizing it and all of that. And when the government shut down, all those people were sent home for 45 days. The data just was never collected. There's nothing to report.
I'll cheerfully say that I hope you're right, because my conclusion is infinitely worse than yours.
I think it's simply that. Now, we'll see what happens if the numbers come out when they finally do come out, and they're extreme one way or the other. My guess is if they come out finally and are extreme, saying that either there's been much more unemployment than we expected, or there's much more inflation than we expected, I imagine the president will then turn around and say, well, you can't trust those numbers because of the shutdown. They're largely estimated and you can ignore them.
Yeah. You can only ignore reality for so long. So
right, exactly. Yeah.
We'll see. We go from what I think is bad to what I think is much, much worse. I want to talk about the Border Patrol. We don't really talk about them very much, and we really should, because as it turns out, what is it, 100 miles from the border in any direction, the Border Patrol, it might even be more than that.
I'd heard it was 100 miles.
It works out that a majority of the American people technically don't have the constitutional rights they think they have where they happen to be. Because the Border Patrol can
fill in the detail.
Well, the Border Patrol you have different rights at the border.
Right.
But if they extend the border 100 miles, now you have different rights in 100 miles. So if you live in Boston or New York or any place on the coast, Los Angeles, San Francisco,
yeah,
tough on you.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I recall when this came out when I was still in Pittsburgh, and I recall looking at the map, and Pittsburgh's an inland city, right? And yet it fell within a couple miles of this Border Patrol 100-mile barrier.
Well, I'm going to get to something that's so much worse than that. I mean, look, I live 90 miles from the Mexican border. We see Border Patrol all the time. I'm near the border. We interact with them. And I will say that I don't find them terribly unreasonable. Mm-hmm. They're just, most of these guys are just doing a job. They're doing it well. They're doing it professionally. And believe it or not, here in Tucson, Arizona, or well, there in Nogales, Arizona, across the street from Nogales, Mexico, the vast majority of border agents that I've come in contact with are Mexican. They're Mexican-American, which makes perfect sense, right? You want somebody who can speak a language of the neighboring country,
right? Who
understands the customs, right? The same way that I would expect up on the Canadian border near Quebec, those border agents should probably have a working knowledge of French.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it all just kind of works. But here's the headline that caught my attention. Border Patrol is monitoring U.S. drivers and detaining those with, quote, suspicious travel patterns.
What does that mean, suspicious travel pattern?
It means, oh, here we go. Because let me read you a paragraph from the interior of the article. They're working with what, Ant? A predictive intelligence program. Sounds a little like pre-crime, doesn't it?
Right. So,
anyway.
So if you behave in a way the computer doesn't predict you should behave, you get pulled over.
Allow me to read. The predictive intelligence program has resulted in people being stopped, searched, and in some cases arrested. A network of cameras scans and records vehicle license plate information, and an algorithm flags vehicles deemed suspicious based on where they came from, where they were going, and which route they took. Federal agents, in turn, may then flag local law enforcement.
Wow.
Now, this is the natural outgrowth of a fundamental tension that we have in the law. On the one hand, we say, what you do in public is public. And it's because of that sentiment, for example, that we are able to legally record police officers as they do whatever they do, right? No matter where you are in the United States, no matter what a police officer tells you, you have every right to record him as you interact with him or as he does his job away from you. You might not have the ability to walk right up and do it 3 feet away. You may have to keep a distance, but that's in public. You can record him. And this has changed police behavior towards individuals for the better. No question about it. On the other hand, providing tension, we have the guarantee of freedom from unreasonable search and seizure. Well, is this an unreasonable search? They're monitoring my license plate in ways that I can barely comprehend. It's in public, yes, but I feel like I'm being searched.
Well, yeah, what bothers me more, it's not that you feel that you're being searched, it's that you can actually be searched if you behave in a way that their computer says you shouldn't be.
But I'm taking a meta step here, and I'm saying everybody's already being searched.
I see. Okay.
Right, and okay, maybe it's monitored.
Monitor,
But in
right.
this case, being monitored, I think, is the same as being searched. It's not my physical being that's being searched, but my activities are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the FBI would tell you that they can follow you around in public all they want.
Mm-hmm.
They'd probably be right about it. But there's a real tension here. And I think most Americans, if they knew that their travel, and we're talking about everybody's travel here, if their travel, their personal travel in their actual car was being monitored by the U.S. Border Patrol, they would have a problem with it.
I don't know.
They'd like
I
it at all.
don't think they. I don't think they would have a problem with it. I'm just judging from my own reaction. I just take it for granted that given the various traffic cams that are around and even the police driving around with, and they've got recording devices, that pretty much if anybody wanted to know where I am at any given point, they could figure it out. It's just the world we live in.
There's a lot more to the world we live in. Turns out the CIA can take control of your car. Did you know that?
Yeah, I wouldn't. It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Why would they want to do that?
Who knows?
Why would they want that ability? I'm just wondering out loud here, but it probably could be so people could drive off bridges and the whatnot.
Here's the piece that bothers me that you haven't mentioned yet. If it's now the case that Border Patrol operating within 100 miles of any border, which covers something like 90% of Americans in their homes, if Border Patrol can use this predictive algorithm and the algorithm flags you and says, for whatever reason, you're behaving in ways the algorithm didn't anticipate, therefore we can pull you over, we can search your car. Now enter civil asset forfeiture laws. If they find something in your car, let's say it's perfectly legal, cash, or you like watches, you got a bunch of expensive watches in your back seat. They can, without any evidence, conclude these must be due to illegal activities, and therefore we confiscate them. They now belong to us. And for people who are unaware of civil asset forfeiture, you can take the police to court here, but there's a presumption of guilt. That is, the police do not have to prove that you obtained the watches or the cash or whatever through illegal means. You have to prove that you didn't.
Good luck proving a negative. Good luck.
Yeah. We're happy to announce that CiVL members can join me and James for a new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live. Words and Numbers Live is a members-only series in which James and I talk about issues in politics, economics, and philosophy. We take a deeper dive and then invite listeners for a live Q&A session. You can also submit your questions for us at wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com. The next session starts Tuesday, December 9th, 5:30 Eastern. To participate in this exclusive series, subscribe to CiVL at CiVL.com. That's CiVL.com. When you log into CiVL.com, you'll find an archive of our past lecture series, as well as the collection of all our episodes of Words and Numbers, and announcements about upcoming lectures in our new Words and Numbers Live series. Subscribe to CiVL for $5 a month or $50 for an annual subscription.
Anyway, that's enough of that. It's Thanksgiving. We shouldn't be all pissy about everything.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Be happy.
I thought that was the main episode. I forgot.
No, and that brings us to the foolishness of the week, which is
Oh, we haven't even got the foolishness yet. Okay.
No, but it's going to be a short one, but I want you to be aware of the foolishness when you gather with your children, however many of the 300 children you have show up to your house for the big holiday. A headline from, of all places, the Wall Street Journal. This year's Thanksgiving surprise, half of the guests are stoned. There's apparently a tradition among younger people to go for a walk, to walk the dog, to pick up more ice, to do anything to get out of the house at some point right around mealtime, and they come back happy and agreeable.
Is this a defensive measure?
I think you could perceive it as such, or just you know how the kids like to say vibes, right? It's good vibes. I think there's a million different reasons for it, but I'm going to have my eye on my children on Thanksgiving if anybody goes outside. And, look, let's be honest. You can get gummies and take them any place you want at this point and just look like you're eating a candy. So who the hell knows? But apparently lots of people like to get stoned with their families, not exactly knowing, on the happiest day of the American year. And I love Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday. It always has been. It's a holiday with no expectation, right? You're not disappointed by the Thanksgiving Day gifts that you get because you don't get any. What do you get? You get a great meal. I mean great. I love everything about Thanksgiving dinner. And then you get to watch football and hang out with your family. It's just a red letter day all the way around. And we often talk about those things that we're thankful for on Thanksgiving episodes. But I thought it might be fun to be talking instead about the things we're thankful we don't have. And there's actually a pretty significant list. And you and I have not discussed this prior to. And I think we should just take turns. But let's admit to each other when something comes up on each of our lists independently of one another.
Yeah, sure.
So go ahead. What are you thankful we don't have?
I'm thankful we do not have a VAT. In Europe,
I was going to put that on my list. It didn't.
many countries have this value-added tax. So people complain in this country or foreigners who come here. They say, well, the price tag says $1 and I get up to the register and I have to pay $1.06 or whatever it is. And I've heard people say, well, we should just include the tax in the price like they do with VAT, to which I say, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
When you break that tax out, it is very clear to everybody how much you've paid for the good and how much you've paid for the tax. When you do it like they do it in Europe, you can easily get, as many countries do, UK, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, value-added tax above 20%.
Mm-hmm.
And the people
It's
don't
just
get as mad because they don't know how much of what they're paying is the tax.
It's baked right into the price. And
yeah,
as a consumer, it's easier. You walk into the store, it says £3. I have £3. Okay, let's do this. But as a taxpayer, I want the extra step. The same way that I want the tariff charge to be noted.
Right. Or the same way, and we would have a very different government today had we done this. Had we, instead of having our income taxes withheld from our paychecks, we had to write a check to the IRS, life would be very, very different.
December 31st, 3/4 of Americans would be criminals every single year because they wouldn't have near enough to pay their tax bill. Not near enough. That's interesting. I almost put it on my list, but I realized my list was too long. I'm very grateful not to have any number of things. So I'm going to start with one that's going to piss people off. I'm glad, and the way I'm going to phrase it, no reasonable person should be pissed off, nonetheless. I'm glad we don't have, and I'm going to have a relatively long list here. See if you can figure out the uniting factor of this big long list of things. Smallpox, polio, chickenpox, measles, rubella, German measles, diphtheria, mumps, hepatitis A, B, and pertussis, which is whooping cough.
Yeah.
Those were just off the top of my head.
Mm-hmm.
That's the list it took me 1 minute to put together. I'm really grateful we don't have those anymore. And I wonder why we don't have those anymore. It's like they just all disappeared for some reason.
Yep, they did. Well, for the reason is vaccines.
Oh, come on. That can't be right. I heard it was breast milk and sunlight and stuff like this.
Well,
no?
The numbers match very closely the advent of vaccines and match exactly what experiments in the lab predict. So, yeah, it's vaccines.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Back to you.
Oh, you don't want to dwell on that for a bit?
I don't think
people... Well, yeah, I want to
All right, look,
underline it a
let me
little
say
bit.
that. Let me say this: of all the things human beings have done on their own behalf, I think vaccines top 2 or 3, maybe the top.
Yeah, and people are going to say, well, vaccines can cause whatever they cause, autism or this or that, and
Nope,
I
no, they
don't know
don't.
enough. I don't
They
know
do
enough
not.
to say one way or the other. And even if they did, you've got to weigh that against the alternative. And people don't appreciate the alternative because we've had vaccines for over half a century. But
The
prior
alternative is
to
dying, dead children.
people were
That's
dying
your
in
alternative.
massive numbers. People are dying or confined to iron lungs for the rest of their lives or whatever it is.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, we
Absolutely
lose sight of
ridiculous.
that.
Yep, that's right.
I've got a whole list here as well, so I've got to pick one. Prohibition on peaceful street demonstration. I'm very happy that we do not prohibit peaceful protest.
Well, we can't.
And we don't.
there's that.
And I say that as a person who has never participated in a peaceful protest. But the mere fact that I know that I could, if I wanted to, without recrimination, makes me more secure in my person and property.
Yeah, we have them here in Tucson on almost a daily basis. People at a certain street corner or two, they tend to wander around with their big giant signs about this stupid thing or that stupid thing. And I'm paying no attention to them, but they seem perfectly happy to be doing it. Yeah, have at it. It is your right to free speech and your right to peaceful assembly.
Mm-hmm.
Two things guaranteed in the First Amendment. And I'm glad that we don't routinely violate those rights. We do violate them sometimes, but more often than not, you're right on the money. I'm thankful, believe it or not, Ant, for that we don't have laws perpetuating the inequality of women.
Oh, that's interesting, because that's going to tie in with my next one.
Well, let
Tell me
me
more.
read to you from actress Meryl Streep, who, we have a certain amount of disdain for actors who decide to go public with their political nonsense. But look, Meryl Streep, for whatever the reason, is involved with the United Nations on a relatively high level, and she's actually doing some work here. So I'm willing to cut her some slack. And she said this, and I would like all Americans to think about this because it's really telling. She's talking about Afghanistan. Today in Kabul, a female cat has more freedom than a woman. A cat may go sit on her front stoop and feel the sun on her face. She may chase a squirrel in the park. A squirrel has more rights than a girl in Afghanistan today because the public parks have been closed to women and girls by the Taliban. A bird may sing in Kabul, but a girl may not in public. This is extraordinary. This is a suppression of the natural law. So says Meryl Streep. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And when I walk out my door and I see that, and here's the thing, right? I have daughters. I have a wife. You think I want what's worst for them? That's crazy. When I see that they have opportunities that men have and they get to choose whatever they want, things are working as they should.
Let me follow up on that. I'm thankful that we do not have a ban on private firearm ownership.
You're just working your way through the Bill of Rights, aren't you?
Right, and this ties in with your last point. And I've done a ton of research into societies that ban gun ownership and those that don't, and we can make all the arguments about lives who are saved and all of that, and all that stuff is true. However, there's one argument in favor of private firearm ownership that you made years ago to me that really hit me viscerally. And that argument is that allowing people to own guns allows women to exercise the same level of force, if necessary, as a man. And you said it in the opposite. You said, take an armed woman and an armed 350-pound man, and she can defend herself. Maybe whether successful or not, the fact is things are pretty even there. But take away their guns, and she loses to the 350-pound man every single time.
Every single time. And look, are there women who can defend themselves against men? Yes, there are. But the vast majority of women can defend themselves against, cannot defend themselves against the vast majority of men. It's a matter of size and strength and nothing else. It's just natural differences in physiology. But a firearm is a fantastic equalizer. It makes the weak woman the equal of the strong man. It makes the old man the equal of the young man. No matter how you want to cut it, it makes people equal functionally. It makes it so certain people don't have to fear other people all the time. And lifting that fear, that's a beautiful thing. We should talk about it more.
And
We really
you've
should.
said, and I'm going to repeat it because I experienced it myself. I've only been to a couple of gun shows, but the first one I ever went to, I went with you.
Yeah, we went
And
together.
It is the one place in the world I have ever been that I felt safest.
Yeah,
Surrounded by what must have been 500 people, every single one of them armed. And I felt safest because I knew if at any point somebody pulled out a gun and started causing a problem, or even just started causing a problem, everybody's armed. They're going to put an end to it right there. Now you could say, well, wouldn't it be just as well if you disarmed everybody? Well, no, because the guy who's going to do harm is going to be the one that's armed. Nobody else will be.
Regardless of the rules. I always tell people that the politest place in the world is the gun range.
Oh my God, it is. Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
is sir or ma'am. Everybody is pleasant. Doors get held open. People say thank you and you're welcome. It is the most polite place I have ever been. And that's true of every gun range I've ever been to.
James and I are delighted to be working with CiVL. For years, we have been pushing people to think about how we can make the world a better place. CiVL's mission of upgrading society fits exactly with what we have been talking about for years. CiVL helps us by allowing us to do what we do best, which is researching topics that are important and communicating these to our listeners in ways we hope they find enjoyable. To see CiVL's extensive list of content, including our podcast, Words and Numbers, and our new lecture series, Words and Numbers Live, visit CiVL.com. That's CiVL.com.
I am really thankful, both personally, I should take the word both out. I am really thankful personally, professionally, and generally that we don't have any more laws against homeschooling. Right? It was phenomenally difficult to homeschool once upon a time. And when I say once upon a time, I mean like around the year 2000, right? 25 years ago. This isn't the deep, dark past. This is the very recent past. And a group of parents across the country, here and there, really, really spent a lot of effort, a lot of their time fighting legal battles, expensive, protracted legal battles that the rest of us who are involved either in homeschooling, as I was, and I think as you were at some point with your kids, and as we both were as professors dealing with the product of homeschool, I want to say thank you to those first people who did all that work at such tremendous personal expense. And I just want to give you an idea of what it was like when my first daughter was right at school age. Right, so the year she would have had to, by law, be enrolled in school. We lived in the People's Republic of New York. And at the time, I was a professor. The wife, I think, had one master's degree at the time. She's gone on to another with a PhD. on the way. So it's not like we were uneducated people. But we were disallowed by law from educating our own children in our own home because, get this, we didn't have credentials.
Yeah, right.
We needed
the credentials that produce so many well-educated students in this country.
We would have needed education degrees. The education degree is one of the silliest degrees I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
It's just silly. It does not produce good teachers. It doesn't mean that there aren't good teachers. It means that they were not produced by the education degree. What do you want? You want content experts, people. I want people with degrees in math teaching math. I don't care if you have an ed degree in which you learned how to make a bulletin board about math. That's asinine. And in New York, we weren't allowed by law, and we decided we were going to do it anyway because my ass, I'm letting my little girl go into that school. And at the very last moment, I got hired for a job in Western Pennsylvania where I would later go on to meet you, and all kinds of wonderful things would happen. And the state of Pennsylvania, not only did they not care if I homeschooled, they wanted to help.
Yeah.
They made it really easy. But in New York, when we decided to do it anyway, my wife looked at me and she said, well, what do I do when somebody shows up? And I said, just tell them I made you do it. What else could I possibly say?
Right.
But we can't both go to jail over this. But it meant enough that I was willing to have one of us go to jail over it. And then you get to Pennsylvania and the doors just opened. And states fell one after the next after that. And I think they've all mostly fallen at this point, and that's for the best. I'm really glad that homeschooling is a thing. I think it's done poorly on occasion. I think it's done very, very well as a rule. How do I know this? I see the product of it, or I saw the product of it in college classrooms.
Yeah.
I could tell you who was homeschooled within 5 seconds of my showing up for the very first class.
Yep.
Why?
Same here.
Because chances are those kids showed up at my office before that class to introduce themselves.
Right.
If they didn't, they were sitting in the front row when I got there, had a notebook open, a pen in their hand, and a book next to the notebook. They were easy to find.
Yep. I'm thankful that we do not have, or no longer have, criminal penalties for unpaid bank debts. We did once upon a time, and there are some countries that still have this. If you went into debt, you couldn't pay it off. I mean, now what do? You declare bankruptcy, and there's a whole thing. No, then you went to jail. And if you think about it, it makes no sense whatsoever. How does that help you to repay your debts, right?
Not only that, Ant. No, not only that. It makes you more expensive, literally, for everybody.
Right. So we develop bankruptcy law, and now there's a procedure that you go through, and it's had a number of good effects. One of them is, you're not throwing poor people in the clink for being poor, but also it encourages entrepreneurship because you're much more likely, look, nobody wants to go through bankruptcy, but you're much more likely to take on the risk of being an entrepreneur if you know the worst that's going to happen to you, not to say it's good, but the worst that's going to happen to you is you're going to have to declare bankruptcy. If the worst that could happen to you is you get thrown in jail and you can't feed your kids, forget being an entrepreneur. And I raise this issue, yes, because I'm thankful for it, but I also want to point out a parallel that as enlightened as we are, and we can see, of course, it makes sense. You don't throw people in jail for bankruptcy, yet we throw them in jail for drugs. And I would argue many of the arguments that I just made about why it's stupid to put people in jail for bankruptcy also apply to throwing people in jail for drugs. Now, dealing is one thing. We'll take that off the table for a moment. But if you're doing drugs to the point that you're dependent upon them or you're not functional, this is a medical problem. It's a psychological problem. Throwing you in jail doesn't address the problem any more than throwing the bankrupt person into jail addresses his problem.
I think throwing drug users in jail is actually even worse than debtors, because with debtors you can identify a victim.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Right. And there,
Yeah. With
with the drug user, there are no victims apart from the user himself.
yeah.
And you know, if you're not causing harm to others, what you do should be of no concern to the rest of us. But I just want to mention here, and you might not know this, most people don't and would have no reason to, but you can find the argument that you just made in favor of bankruptcy in Plato's dialogues.
Really?
Yep. So all the way back in ancient Athens, everybody understood that bankruptcy was probably the smart way to go here. And I find that endlessly fascinating because we forgot. And then there literally were debtors' prisons, right? And these were hard places.
Let's do one more. And I had the first, you take the last.
Well, now I got to choose between two, so I'm going to do two. Because I know that my last one will be one that you're going to have more to say about than me. I am endlessly glad that we do not have hostile international neighbors. There is no enemy at either of our international borders. You can, I'm leaving the Alaska-Russia thing out of this, right? The functional borders that we have, the Canadian border and the Mexican border, are peaceful borders with allies, regardless of how it gets spun by politicians. The Mexican people are our friends. The Canadian people are our friends. And I am very grateful for both of them. I think they add a lot to our country. They don't take anything away from our country. And we're never at war with them.
Right.
The Mexican War, long time ago now, largely forgotten. I would say entirely forgotten, but nothing is ever entirely forgotten. So there you go. And the last thing, Ant, and this may ruffle some feathers because it's not absolute, but I'm really, really grateful that we don't have poverty.
Yeah.
And we really don't.
We don't have poverty anything like, not even close to what poverty was up until about a century ago.
In this country.
Yeah.
Right. And you can go to many other countries and get a full view of poverty right now. And it's terrible. Now, we still have poverty here. There are still people living on the streets. But when you dig into that, you find that there's a pretty sizable set of those people who live that way by choice. There's a very big set of those people who are very obviously mentally ill. We have a mental illness problem. We have an integration problem. People don't want to be in society. And then there's a very small number of people who, through bad fortune, just ended up losing everything and found themselves out of doors. That is nowhere near, even close to a majority of the people that we call homeless, who are the poorest of the poor. We have working poor, but most of them have air conditioning and microwaves and flat screen TVs and cell phones. We've done away with poverty for the most part as it was once understood. And I'm endlessly thankful that people born now grow up in a world like that. It's a better world. And you and I say that often, Ant, that it's a better world. And we say it every year. I can't remember ever not saying it because it's always better. And if you're going to sit back and be contemplative on Thanksgiving, that's probably the thing to contemplate, that life just gets better every year. And if you're lucky enough to still be here next year, it'll probably be better. And, you know, when life is that good, you should probably just be a little nicer to each other. That's part of being thankful too. So I guess get high, have a nice meal, watch some football, and be nice to each other. That's the takeaway I have from today. Happy Thanksgiving.
Or you could substitute Star Trek for football, and that'll be okay
God,
too.
my God, you're an ass. My God. My God. Happy Thanksgiving, Aunt.
Happy Thanksgiving, James. At Words and Numbers, we spend a lot of time talking about what's going on in the economy and the government, but fundamentally, all of this boils down to one thing. The greatest threat facing modern society is a lack of respect, that people who disagree somehow find it difficult, if not impossible, to discuss their differences in a civil manner. We at CiVL are interested in upgrading civilization by encouraging people to engage with new ideas and ultimately engage civilly with each other. If you share this idea, please join us by subscribing at CiVL.com. That's CiVL.com.